Okay, padayon to sa aton nga lesson, living life as God's image bearers. This will be our last lesson for the year. We've learned about the purpose why God created man. We've learned man is created in the image of God. Last time we have learned about the image of God as a function, functions of co-ruler, co-creator in our relationships and stewards of or stewards on the earth. Subong hapon to nantang specific ways we are God's image bearers, namely spiritual, moral, and relational aspects of man as God's image bearers. Okay, so the question to start this lesson is, what should give a person self-worth, and how should a person form his or her identity or self-esteem? What should give a person self-worth, identity, or self-esteem? I think this age is an age where self-worth, identity, and self-esteem is very big. Muna nga sa mga drama or sa mga movies, ang term nila palusot is, I'm trying to find myself. Okay, I'm trying to find myself. Okay, wala pa nila nakita ila self. So, what should give a person self-worth, identity, or self-esteem? What is self-esteem? Self-esteem is how you look at yourself. And this self-esteem could be accurate or inaccurate. Ang accurate is you form a healthy view of yourself. Ang inaccurate or unhealthy is either you have a low self-esteem or you can have too much self-confidence. Ang meaning naman sa too much self-confidence, believe na believe sa sarili niya. Bisan, why na sa ibuga, unahon niya lang anay i-balandra or i-market ang iyang self, even though he or she has nothing to show for. Araya, sa piyak na nga end of the spectrum, perti naman kataas ang tulok kasi ako galingon, bisan wala man na tutuod. Or, the other extreme is low self-esteem. Anong cause sina? The cause of low self-esteem, it's either unhealthy environment, nagdako sa pamilya nga, permi lang sa gina put down, okay? Permi sa ginasuyaan or permi sa ginabully. So that person doesn't need school or friends from school to bully or to put him or her down. Bisan sa balay pa lang, permi sa ginahambalan mango, permi sa ginahambalan laway, permi sa ginahambalan kung ano man da ang mga malain ng mga butang, so that that person grew up having an unhealthy view of themselves. So, what should give a person self-worth, and how should we form our identity and self-esteem? This is what we will try to answer sa sininga lesson. Okay? Because looking at the world, how do you think the world gives worth, identity, or self-esteem to a person? Anong values ang kalibutan? That they think that this person is a person of worth, may dating, may identity, or self-esteem. When you walk into an interview in Thailand, the first impression sang boss, kung makwa ka or hindi, is, kung sa Pilipinas niya, pleasing personality, direya is, kung gwapa ka or hindi. Tama? Because this society gives value, gives worth, gives esteem. Sakto ginakambas ang Bible, they are a respecter of person. Kina-respect kanila based sa imo outward appearance. Okay? That's why, bisan wala unod imo utok, basta nakabayo ka lang tarong, they give esteem and worth to outward appearance. Okay? That is how, and with different worlds or with different places, they give worth and identity and esteem to a person differently. Pilipinas, lain. Diri sa Thailand, lain. And so we need to discover how do the world around us give worth, identity, and self-esteem, because this is the way they measure value and worth and beauty of a person. But we will answer what should give you self-worth and how should you form your identity or self-esteem according to the Bible. Okay? So, tunanta sa mong hapon, the specific aspects of being God's image bearers. Inihan nga mga areas sang aton nga pagkatawo, can it form a healthy identity to us as a person? Okay? But before we go there are similarities and differences with God's creation. So when we talk about being the image bearers of God, we are quick to think of how we are different from animals and the rest of creations. Because man was created according to God's image, we normally think lain na tadayon from the animals and the rest of creation. But let us be careful of thinking only in terms of our differences, because apparently we also have similarities with animals and from the rest of creation. Paano to naging similar? This similarity is due to the fact that, like the rest of creation, we were created by God to inhabit this world. We are meant to share this world with animals and the rest of creation. So before going to the specifics of being an image bearer, we will consider first how we are similar and different with the rest of God's creation. So our similarities with the rest of creation are in the following areas. Number one, we are created to be living creatures. Okay? Gin-create kita tanan to have life. Okay? We are living beings. So ang term ng living creature is used to refer to human beings, but it is also applied to animals. Genesis 2, when God breathed into the nostrils of Adam the breath of life, that man became, ang description sa Biblia is living creature. That is how he described man. Pero sa chapter 1 verse 20, when God created sea animals or water sea creatures, I'm saying, let the water swarm with swarms of living creatures. So ang mga isda are also called living creatures, like Adam was called a living creature. So the same when God created great sea creatures and every living creature that moves in the water. Then, chapter 1, verse 24, according to their kind, the earth brings forth living creatures. So water or land animals, we are all called living beings. So apparently we have this similarity with the animals in that we are all created living beings. That's why when God destroyed the world with a flood in the time of Noah, the phrase, the breath of life, is used to refer to both humans and animals. Sabi niya sa Ginoo, I will destroy all flesh in which is the breath of life under heaven. Okay? So, ang buhi nga tinuga is not only limited to humans, but it is also applicable to animals. Amo na, two and two of all flesh in which there was a breath of life. Meaning, ang Ginoo gahatag man value somehow sa mga sapat nga iya gin create, because as human beings and as also animals, we are created to be living creatures. Number two, we are also formed from the ground. So kung gina, ang phrase living creature is used for both man and animals. Subong naman niya, formed from the ground is also used for man plants, and animals. Adam was formed from the ground. That's why he's called Adam, from the word Adama, that is red dust or red earth. But Genesis 2:9, out of the ground the Lord made to spring up every tree. So kung si Adam, out of the ground. Amo nang curse ng Ginoo is also the ground. The tree was also formed out of the ground. Okay? Amo nang nagapamunga siya halin sa duta. But also interestingly, every beast God also formed out of the ground. So the way mag-istorya ang Biblia, tao, plants, and even animals were all formed out of the ground. So we have this similarity with the living things of the world. We are formed from the ground. Now, there's only one exception to this description. Only Eve is said to be not to be formed out of the ground. Di niya naghalin si Eve. Eve was formed from the man. Okay? So tanan nga tinugas ang Ginoo, si Eve lang yang exception to the rule because she is called Isha or Ishi, because she came from man. Okay? So, woman is called woman because she was taken out of man. She was formed from Adam. Okay? She was not formed out of the ground. So, duwa na ka similarities. Number 3, we are then commanded to be fruitful and multiply. Okay? So the command to be fruitful and multiply, to fill the earth, was given to both man and animals. Verse 22, multiply, be fruitful, and fill the waters. Verse 28, hambali sang Ginoo sa mga tao, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Okay? So, God did not mean, amo na nga daw, bisan anong tabla pagkahimo, bisan ano ta kapatay sang mga sang mga subay, dugay-dugay ara na mas lagyapon kadamo sa ila, because they were meant to multiply and fill the earth. Ito kadasig lang gid sa ila ya. Okay? Isa ka palang kabata, inyo kureng do siyam na. Okay? So they were also commanded to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Okay? And lastly, plants are given as food for both man and animals. Okay? Verse 29, behold, I've given you every plant. Okay? You shall have them for food. But verse 30, to every animals of the earth, birds of the heavens, and creeping things, I have given every green plant for their food. Okay? So, both man and animals were given plants to be their food. Okay, so we see that before we consider our differences and uniqueness with the rest of creation, we have to consider how we are similar to them. Why are we similar to the rest of creation? Because God created human beings to live on this earth with the rest of them. So we are meant to coexist with other living beings and non-living beings. Okay? Amo na, it's but normal. However, we have just elevated other living beings to a different degree, ang tao. To the point nga may mga tao lang gidya nga palangga pa nila ila sapat, sobra pa sa ila bata, or palangga pa, grabe ang ila pag-adore sa sapat, that they have elevated those living creatures as deities, nga ginasimba na nila, ti sala na na. But the reason why we have similarities with the rest of creation, it's because we were meant to coexist and live on this earth with them. Okay? So they are living beings like us. So our differences with the rest of creation is this. Number 1, we were created at the climax of creation. There is a reason why God created humans last. We are the apex of God's creation. Kita ang bida sang pagtuga sang Diyos. So man is created at the climax, at the culmination of God's created act on the world. In other words, the world was created and prepared to be inhabited by the crowned and special creation of God. That special crowned creation of God is man. Okay? amo ng blank sa inyong mga notes. Man is the crowned and special creation of God. Now, God could have just created man first, then create a world to complement us. Is that possible? Yes. Pwede man ito yung hambasing, okay, unahon kong tao, hulat-hulat ka lang da, lutaw-lutaw ka lang da na sa hangin, kag I will just create a world around you. But the order of God's creation unfolded through creating an inhabitable, beautiful, and fruitful world first. Then He created man to inhabit it. So to tell you, there is no other earth or other planet that God created for man, because bisan ano pa ni kag blemished, kag degraded, kag corrupt ang kalibutan that we live in, God first created this world so that it would be inhabited. It's a beautiful and fruitful world nga gin-create sang Ginoo para sa iyang crowned and special creation. Okay? So we are at the climax of God's creation. Amo na nga nag-abot ta last. Okay? Second, we were created with a different plan and design. In the creation week, God created everything through His command, but only for the exception of man that God convened the triune council to speak of His design in creating man after His image. Okay? So, kung manotice nyo, the Hebrews are fond of patterns. From day 1 to day 6, we have been hearing, and God said, okay, let there be light, let there be waters, let there be animals, let there be planets. However, on the 6th day, this is the only time that God had a different plan and design for man. God convened the triune God, and he talked within the triune God, saying, let us make man in our image. So only man is said to be created in the image and likeness of God, which is not something said of the rest of creation. So kung kagina, we are similar sa sapat kag sa plants in that we could be living creatures formed out of the ground. Ang sapat kag tao also were meant to eat plants, but only man is said to be created in the image of God, because we were created not only to be the climax of God's creation, but God had a different plan and design for us. Number 3, we were created to rule over creation. We were created to have authority in ruling over creation. Therefore, we can say that man is the highest and the best of God's creation, created to bear His image, created to rule His earth. We are the crowned and special creation of God. Thus, we are the highest and the best of God's creation, created to rule the earth. In other words, bisan ano mo palangga imo nga pet or ang sapat or anything nga ginaalaga mo sa farm or sa balay, man was created to rule creation. Okay? Kaya sang una, hambalila, ang tao gakwa ido para bantayan ila balay. Subong niya, ang tao gakwa ido para sila mabantay sang ido. That's a different paradigm. Okay? So, make sure nga nagkuha ka mo sang ido para ang ido mabantay sa inyo balay, hindi nga kamo ang mabantay sang ido. Because animals were not created by God to rule man. Okay? So, isipon nyo na mayo kung ano ang paradigm nga ginasunod nyo. Okay? Because we are the best and the highest of God's creation, created to rule the earth. Okay? Sabi ka, hindi ka da manudlo-nudlo. Kaya nadula mong isa ka kuring. In loving memory of Armani. Okay. Kaya why mo ginbantayan ang ginpabantay sa imo. Okay, so as God's creation, man has both similarities and differences with the rest of His creation. So we are similar, created to coexist with them, but we're also different. With these factors, we will know how to coexist with the other created beings in our world, and we will also appreciate how we were created uniquely as human beings. So we are similar so that we can appreciate them as living beings. Naturally, ako ang tao, hindi ko pet lover. Okay? But I should also appreciate that an animal is another living being like me. May kabuhi man na sila. Okay? Because God created them to coexist with us and God created us to coexist with them. Okay? But at the same time, because we have differences, we will also appreciate how unique we are as human beings. We are the crown and special creation of God. We are His highest and His best creation. So amo nang aton unique difference sa tanan nga gintugas ang Ginoo. So now, as while it is true that being the image bearer of God has to do with the functions of co-rulers, co-creators, and stewards, but there are also specific areas in which human beings like us are more like God than the rest of creation. So we will examine how are we more like God in 6 specific aspects. So bunga hapon tunanta tatlo lang. Spiritually, how are we like God? Morally, how are we like God? And relationally, how are we like God? Okay? Number 1, like God, we are spiritual beings so that we can relate to Him. Now, since God is a spiritual being, no wonder He also created us to be spiritual beings so we can relate to Him through our spirits. John 4, hambali Jesus, the hour is coming and now is the time when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. Why should we worship the Father in spirit and in truth? Because God is spirit. No wonder we relate to Him with our spirits. Okay? We are not only external physical beings. Okay? We relate to the world through our bodies, but we relate to God who is spirit also through our spirit. Therefore, we are not purely physical and emotional beings. We are beings with spirits because it is through our spirits that we can relate with God, who is also a spiritual being. Our spirits enable us to worship, to pray, and allow Him to speak and to relate to us. Okay? We worship God with our spirits. We pray to God with our spirits. We speak, and conversely, no wonder Romans 8 would say the Spirit bears witness with our spirit. Okay? So how do you know that you're a true child of God? The Spirit will communicate that with your spirit. Hindi na yan kinasulat sa imo Bible kung saan ka nagbaton, dra ka kabalong anak kasang Diyos. No. The Spirit of God will tell you. He will make known to you. He will reveal to you. He will give you that peace that you're a true child of God. He connects with us through our spirits. So we connect to God with in worship, in prayer, and the same time, ang Ginoo mahambal man sa aton through our spirits. That's why ang pangamuyo ni Paul kagina, in your inner being. Okay? Because while we worship God with our mouths, with our hands, we lift up holy hands, but primarily gakonekta sa Ginoo through our inner being. Ang command is love the Lord your God with all your mind. Okay? Love the Lord with God with all your soul and with all your heart. Okay? Because God knows that if He has your heart, He has your whole being. Okay? So, only human beings are known to have an organized religion, which is not true with the animal world. Okay? Only human beings are known to have an organized religion, which is not true with the animal world. Do you agree? Now, I would hear, halin pa kami sang gamay, nga si mama kasi papa gahambal amon kuno ido nga sila si Christian. Kaya kung magsimba kami, ara man sa da, kung magkanta kami, ga uwang-uwang man sa kuno. And not long ago, si Pastor Ed, kay dog lover man siya, gahambal man sa ila ido, ga-attend prayer meeting, mas mayo pa kuno sa iba nila nga membro, kay ila membro ay ga prayer meeting. Is it true that a dog can be a Christian? The answer is, do you see a temple? that dogs go to. Kasi sila nag-organize. Nga ido gawali. Patugmaw. Na unahan pa to tusmaw si Mapin sang pagtugmaw ni Minchin. Di ba? Una pa sa tubig. Oo. Galing pag pagbutwa ya, imbes maglimpyo ka buhay ya, pero tito sa kaig ko, kayo grabing lutak sang samroyot. Okay, now there are temples in India where they worship monkeys. Okay? But it was not organized by monkeys. Okay, because only human beings are known to have an organized religion. Because while animals have emotions, I do think, ako lang yung pagpati, animals do not have the spirits to connect with God. Because God did not create animals to connect with Him in that way. Now, while we read in the book of Psalms, nga panawag ang Ginoo, stars worship Him, earth worship Him, angels worship Him, but out of all the creatures that God have made, God gave us the Spirit. God gave us a spirit so that we can connect to Him through our spirits. That is how He relates to us, and that is how we relate to Him. Therefore, although religions are not worshiping and serving the true God, but any religion is a testimony to the fact every human being is trying to find a way to connect to a higher being. Okay? That's a very clear testimony. So you don't see any animal feeling the need to worship God. Kakabatian ko na pero may taga Thanksgiving so una masiling sila mayo pa kuno ang manok magkaon kay ti makatangla pa na sa langit kuno ang manok ka pasalamat sa Dios tuod ka pastor hindi na tuod amo lang ang posisyon niya kay hindi man sa kakaon diretso mo kinahanglan ni man di ba matangla gyud man sa langit para manaog ang ginakaon niya. Chickens do not have the spirit to connect to God. Because out of all creation, only God has given man the spirit, enabling us to seek for the divine. Okay? So, because we have a spirit, let us render to the true God our spirits to relate with Him, to worship Him, to pray to Him, to obey Him, and to love Him with our spirits. Okay? Amo na, ako lang yung mahambal every Sunday, kung magsimba ka mo din, updaman inyong kalag. Okay? Be here with all of your being. Kay kalaw ay nga, ari ka di physically, ang imo yung spirit, kundi hindi na ito nagalabot. Okay? Either ang ginaisip mo pang obra kagapon, or ang hinalay mo nga ginhalay subong, or ang gahulat pa nga sa imo nga ulubrahon sa buwas. Our spirits can easily wander. Okay? That's why when we relate to God, whether in public worship or in individual worship, because we are spiritual beings, let us render to Him our spirits. Number 2, because of our spirits, we are also immortal beings. This is what Wayne Grudem points out, that in connection to our spiritual life, we are immortals. Ano namin niya? We are spiritual beings that will not cease to exist forever. So although we have a point of beginning, unlike God, but from the very first day of our existence, when our spirits are created, this spirit will exist for all eternity. Okay? How do I know? Because when a man dies, his spirits move on. Okay? Amo na gani may verse sa Hebrews, in the presence of the spirits made perfect. Okay, that is a temporary state. Nga ang spirit mo mabulag sa imong lawas. That's why even though your body is laid to rest, your spirit continues to live on, and one day that spirit will be reunited with your body, because once our spirits are created, we will not cease to exist forever. We are immortal in that sense. Okay, so this is the aspect where we are more like God, different from plants, different from animals, in that we have spirits to relate to God, who is primarily spirit. Okay, any question? Okay, secondly, moral. The second aspect of our specific likeness to God as His image bearer is our moral aspect. We human beings have a consciousness of right and wrong through our inner conscience. Okay? Tunantani pagkabota sa Romans, when the Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves even though they do not have the law. We learn from the book of Romans nga differentiate rin ni Paul ang Jews kag Gentiles. Sa mali ni Paul, bisan ang mga Gentiles, why pa law ni Moses, by nature, they do what the law requires because even though they do not have the written law of Moses, they have a law within themselves. What is that law? It is described by God that that law is written on their hearts, called conscience. That's why your conscience bears witness. Whether that conscience accuse or excuse you on the day of judgment. So, this is the inner feeling. Conscience is the inner feeling from within that makes us feel guilty or not right when we commit something wrong, and it gives us peace when we do something right. That is your standard definition of conscience. The inner feeling that makes you feel guilty or something is not right. Okay? Amo na may mga terms kita, di ko sure kung English ni or Filipino ni nga saying, ginakaon ko sang akon konsensya. Okay? Ginalagas ko sang akon konsensya. That feeling that does not sit right with you. Even the hardened criminal. May mga tao diyan ginalagas ang ilang konsensya, hindi sila makatulog. They are not at peace until they make it right. And when you do something right, conscience will also give you a sense of peace. So, we are morally accountable before God. Although this moral consciousness can be defective and not always accurate. Okay? Ang moral consciousness pwede na intrahan because it can be seared. Ano means ang seared? This is what Paul says. In later times, some will depart from the faith, devoting themselves to deceitful spirits and teachings of demons through the insincerity of liars, whose consciences are seared. So, ni mga tao nga nagalagas ang mga kabutigan, ang hambal ni Pablo, their consciences are seared. They have a conscience galing. They harden their conscience not to feel guilty when they should have felt guilty. Okay? And I think amo ni ginahimo mo sa either sa baka or sa karabaw that ano na ganito tawag nila, you brand something para manhid. Kaya mo ng word sa Ilonggo or sa Tagalog, magmanhid ng konsensya. So that conscience can be defective and may not always be accurate because you can suppress the truth and you can be deeply affected by sin through a perverse sense of right and wrong. Okay? Mga awat ka 20 milyones, ngayon hindi ka lang niya, do okay lang si mo yung makatulog. That is a seared conscience. Gabinutig ka na nga, duway ka nakabatsyag sang sala kung magbinutig ka. That is a seared conscience. Okay? It can be defective. It may not always be accurate, but this conscience is one of the bases in which God will use in judging the unbelieving world that is without the law of God. Amo na hambali Paul, on the day when, according to his gospel, God judges the secrets of man, what will God use? I have given you a conscience. And that conscience will accuse you or excuse you. Meaning, ginpamatian mo imo konsensya or wala. So this inner conscience will hold us accountable to God. It will accuse us or excuse us before Him. Now, mind you, animals, do they have conscience? May konsensya yan ang animals. Animals may feel the guilt and fear when they commit wrong. just because they fear the punishment, but they don't have this sense and capability of being morally accountable. Damo gasiling, Pastor Mayo pa akon ido kay loyal sa akon. Ang ina nga ido, mangkutabi ang iya nga partner kung loyal man sa iya nga partner. Pila na pinabusong sa sinang ido, sa sinang kalye. So your dog is loyal to you, but ask the dogs in the soy. Amo nang iban kapuno na lang nga animals don't even have a sense of marriage. Nga mapakasal ko. Although may araman mga animals, nga masiling sila, when they mate for life. Whether it's birds, or kung ano man ang iban nga sahi, or may mga insects that mate for life. But generally, when animals feel guilty, gapaluoy-luoy sila tsura, mga dog eyes na blang, gapaluoy-luoy ko no, gapaluoy-luoy na kay kulbaan hanuton. Alright? Amo na ang mga dolphin gapalapit sa ila trainer sa safari world kay may baylo nga isda. Okay? So out of guilt, out of fear, they may feel guilty or they may feel fear when they commit something wrong, but they don't have a moral sense. They don't have a moral compass like a human being does. So human beings may have a strong tendency to disobey the law, but our moral capabilities enable us to recognize the law and obey it. Okay? And so this moral capacity, more or less, restrains the evil in the world to protect us from total chaos. Total chaos can be described as anarchy. Okay? Nga ang mga seaman, may double pay sila kung mag-agi sila sa Somalia. Because Somalia is an anarchist state, meaning there is no law. Bahala ka na daya kung maano da matabo sa imo, amo na, why sila problema magpatay, why sila problema mangawat, because it is an anarchist state. So we thank God that although, amo na, bisan ano pa kahambal sang mga liberal sa Amerika nga i-decentralize ang police, nga ipakancel nila kunong pulis, hambal sang isa nila ka presidente, kung may crime i-commit, kasi sino ka manawag. Okay? Because even though there are corrupt police officers, somehow the moral conscience in man restrains the evil in the world to protect us from total chaos. Okay? Kagapasalamat sa Ginoo, living in Thailand for so many years, kung kisa daw mahuya ka bala, kaysa aton nga history books would say, the Philippines is the only Christian nation in the world. But where do you feel safer? In the only Christian nation in Asia or sa Thailand? Suksok ka sang kulintas mo sa Manila. Ano mabilin? Bisan liog mo guro mo upod sa kulintas. Di ba? Why? The capacity for moral conscience more or less restrains evil in the world. Amo na mas makasiling kagid bisan sa Japan, why sila kilala sa tutuod sa Ginoo, probilin mo cellphone mo sa publiko nga hindi na madula because more or less people still have that conscience inside. Okay? So it protects us from total chaos. This restraining evil or this restraining grace is called the common grace of God. Okay? Bisan wala ni sila nuluwas sa grasya, pero ang Ginoo pagyapon nga pugong sa tao by installing that software inside the heart of man that gives us a consciousness something is wrong, something is right. Mura makasiling ka bisan unbeliever ni sa nga tatay or nanay, ginadisiplina yagyapon iya bata for what is wrong, for what is right, because that is ingrained in the heart of man, a sense of right and wrong. So, we are capable of being holy and unholy because of our moral consciousness. Okay? So Wayne Grudem mentioned that when we act according to God's moral standards, our likeness to God is reflected in behavior that is holy and righteous. Okay? So in our moral consciousness, we are more like God when we act according to His moral standards. Amon ang calling sa Ginoo, we are called unto holiness. Because the more we follow or conform to God's moral standards, the more we are like God. But in contrast, our unlikeness to God is also reflected whenever we sin. Okay? So sin is a lack of conformity to God's will. So kung wala ka gusunod sa Ginoo, you are unlike God. Okay? So amo na ang duwa ka area that we are like Him. We are spiritual beings and we are moral beings. Any question before ta mag-proceed? All right, last, the relational aspect. We can have a relationship with God. We are beings created with the capability to have relationships. This aspect of our likeness with God is related with our emotional likeness with Him. God created us with emotions so that we are capable of relationships. So no matter how much you hate your emotional state or your emotions, our emotions actually facilitate relationships. Okay? So our relationships can only have meaning in the context of our emotions. While emotions should not be the only driver for our relationships, but our relationships are defined and have meaning, are enjoyed because of emotions. Tama? Muna, do, ano ba lang, mga butterfly in your stomach, do, naminamian ka gid sa isa ka tao, gablush ka, or nahuya ka, or you're attracted to that person because emotions facilitate relationships. Emotions make relationships possible. Okay? So the Bible is a story of God's relationship with humanity. He relates to us in terms of relationships and personal emotions. Kagamo gini ang dos stigma lang gusto nila dulaon sa prisuhan. Kaysa prisuhan ko no, nakadinumero ka lang. You are number 1, number 2, number 3. Sa silda, utso. Okay? And even in some schools, labi na kung ano ka mo bla, dumudamo, linibo ka mo, so you call your students by their number. Okay? But God relates with us in terms of relationships and personal emotions. Ang muna mabasahan mo sa Biblia, He knows the stars and calls them by their name. So kung ang Ginoo nakakilala sang tag sa kabituon kag siya naghatag sa ngalan sa ila isa kag isa, how much more will God care for you who never lets any hair of your head fall into the ground without Him knowing? Okay? And so when God created Adam, He did not leave him in the garden alone. Okay? Kaya ang concept na lang sa unang garden, pag-create sang Ginoo, Adan, ikaw na bala. But if you are conscious, when God created paradise, Eden was paradise because God was there with him. I think the best verse sa bilog na Biblia is in Genesis 2 when God was walking with Adam in the cool of the day. Ubda na ito sila lakat sa kahaponanon because God was there with Adam in fellowship with him. And Jesus, in the New Testament, made possible this relationship of the sinful man with God through salvation. The Bible calls this reconciliation. Salvation then becomes a relationship bridge that bridges the sinful man with the holy God. Because this reconciliation enables us to have an eternal, loving fellowship in the presence of our God. Okay? And so, um, yes, in Revelation, God Himself will be with them as their God. So we can have relationship with God. Secondly, we also have the capacity to have relationships with other human beings. Because God created us to be relational, to have a relationship with Him. No wonder we can also have the capacity to have relationships with others. So the deepest of human relationships is through marriage, an intimate relationship between the husband and a wife. Why? Because no matter how close a child is to the mother. Okay? A child may suck her or his mother's breast, but a child should not have physical intimacy or having sexual relations with his or her mother, because that is only reserved for husbands and wives. Okay? Ang mga incest is an abomination. Kag ginpaklaro gina sa Ginoo, command gina sa mga Israelites, because we can infer that by commanding that in Egypt, incest is accepted. Okay? And so the deepest of our relationships is through marriage, because that relationship should be intimate. And so when God created Eve for Adam, they were not meant only to live individual lives or even just be friends. So intentional yung Ginoo pag create sa babae, ginhatag ya kay Adan. Adam, this is your wife. You're meant to have sex. You're meant to be intimate because you will have children and fill the earth. There's no friend zone in the garden. So God brought them together in marriage. Then this marriage relationship will bear fruit into a family. And having a family, now a parent should have a relationship with the children. And it will extend to their grandchildren. So the relationship widens and expands. Okay? So then we are also capable of relationships with the community, with our friends, with our church as the community of the believers in God. Okay? And so, kung kisa, though hindi na tabla ka klaro kung anong mga linya, but because God is a relational God, no wonder why kita nga mga tao are also relational beings. I think amo gining reklamo ni Atsan Atsan Witaya, nga hamal niya Atsan, na notice ko lang nga halin ko ya sa bukid, halin ko sa probinsya, dito ya sa amon probinsya sa Mihongson, tanan nga tao dira sa Banwa, tanan nga tao sa barangay kilalahay. Sino neighbor mo kilalahay? Because they have relationships. But only it's in the city where individuality is king. Way kakilala sino mo imo neighbor. Kay pagpuli nila mansig-mansig sulod sa ila balay, mansig-mansig sulod sa ila kwarto. Okay? But we were created by God to have relationships. Okay? No wonder Wayne Grudem has noted that in our family relationships, we are superior to angels who do not marry or bear children. Okay? So, angels are more powerful than human beings, pero may isa ka butang nga mga angel, wala katilaw. Ano na? Sex or marriage. Because angels cannot bear children or they are not given to marriage. Okay? Wala sila yaga pakasal, handom magpakasal, or manganak. That's why this is one area we are superior to angels. Okay? So kung wala ka plano magpakasal, islan yung ngalan nyo sa Angel Burger. Okay, so spiritually, morally, and relationally, we have our likeness with God more than the rest of creation. These are aspects built within us as we interact with God, with one another, and the rest of creation. So when we use these capabilities and maximize them in their intended purpose, then we will bring God the glory. So in our spirits, the more you use your spirit to relate with God, you need to use your spirit to relate with God. Kaya mo na hindi mo man ma-appreciate ang Biblia, ang pagwali, ang pagkanta, kung sa mga cooks pabla, wala espiritu. Okay? Kaya hindi mo man ma-enjoy ang cook kung wala espiritu. Okay? Lasay. So, you use your spirit to relate with God. And morally, kabay pa that we will have the a clean conscience. Amo gina aim ni Pablo. I aim for a clean conscience, whether before God or before man. morally right and morally wrong should have a clear line because God is a moral being. And lastly, our God is relational. Our God is an emotional God because He wants to have a relationship with us. Okay? Kung may mga bagay nga way sa nanamian, He expressed His hatred. Kung may mga bagay nga nanamian man siya, He expressed His pleasure. Because when we use these capabilities and maximize them, then we bring God the glory. Any question? Okay, assignment. Ask and discuss the following questions with someone who is comfortable in sharing them with you because we will be talking about self-esteem. Self-esteem. So, whether it's a friend or a student nga lapit sa imo or someone nga feeling mo duga struggle sa self-esteem, ask them in what specific areas do you struggle with self-esteem or what are your triggers? Okay, what are your triggers that cause you to have a low self-esteem? For example, ang iban, ang trigger nila is intelligence. Ang iban, ang trigger nila, ang ila height. Ang iban, ang trigger nila, ila ilong. Ang iban, ang trigger, nga kadlaw, ginaw. Ang iban, ang trigger nila, ila color. Okay? Or ang iban, ang trigger nila, ang ilang accent. And so, what specific areas do you struggle with self-esteem or what are your triggers? Now, that's why nagambal ko, talk with someone who is comfortable sharing with you because these are personal matters. Okay? And so, number two, how do people normally build their own self-esteem? So you ask this to them. Tungod mo nimo trigger, dra ka low self-esteem, and what are the factors you use to build your own self-esteem? Pangita ka coach, you go to counseling or gapangita ka therapy or ano ni? Are these factors you use to build your self-esteem healthy and sustainable? Meaning, can it really help you? Okay? Or is it unhealthy and unsustainable? Why or why not? Nga, if you base your self-esteem sa imong nga skin color, ano himuon mo? Papaputi ka. Di ka nagputi ka na. So, hindi na low imo self-esteem. Or ang cause sa imo self-esteem, ang imo ilong. Kaya ginpalaba-laba mo na, kaya ginpatas-taas mo na, ti ano subong, do namin na imo self-esteem. So you ask them, are these factors healthy and sustainable? And number three, will you be willing to learn a more healthy and sustainable way of building your self-esteem as you were originally designed to be? Okay? Para, if they are only building their self-esteem based on external factors, meaning ko nang ilang trigger is kabigaduhon. Tika naman garanon ka na subong. Is that a sustainable factor that can build a healthy self-esteem? Or else, will you be willing to learn more? So you share this lesson, then you ask, lastly, in learning and realizing that as a human being, you are created after God's likeness to have spiritual, moral, and relational capacities. In what specific ways do they build a more healthy and sustainable self-esteem? Do they help you? Ano na? Screenshotan ko ni, isend ko ni sa aton nga group chat para mahimo nyo ni nga assignment asking your friends. Okay? So, amo ni aton assignment for this year end, opening a way for you to talk and share about man created after God's likeness. Okay? So, to close, if you will do this assignment sa ila, subong hapon, we will discuss, pila ni? One, ano ka dugay ni practice? Okay. Kaya may practice pa ko nung singles. So, we will discuss, ano ni? Ang ini nga mga questions when we come back next year, we will learn 3 more specific areas, but pabalon sa inyo, at least na-spare inyo self-esteem sa buong hapon. Next time when we come back, we will definitely share in what specific areas do you struggle with self-esteem. Because more or less, ang ining mga butang, either wa ini ka discussan or wa ini ka istoryahan, so that in areas like Sunday school, you can also share what are your triggers, or ihan drita mabalaan, do you have a healthy view of yourself? Okay, and in what way can we help you overcome it? And lastly, to focus on our likeness with God so that we can build a healthy and sustainable self-esteem. Okay? Because a person of whatever age or state, more or less may arat tangag struggle sa self-esteem. Because with every age, may arat tangag ginatawag nga, ano ganyan, identity crisis. Okay? Alin sang gamay ta, when we transition to something else, whether it's ano na, a child to a teen, from a teen to an adult, from an adult to married life, from married life to a parent life, from parents to being grandparents, every stage of life, there is an identity crisis. Okay? And with that, what can help you face those crises is a healthy, sustainable self, a view of self. Okay? Because God is meant for us to know who we are in the face of Jesus Christ. So, next time, hindi ko magpautang, istoryahan tani ang self-esteem, ang triggers, kag ang a healthy, sustainable way of building a healthy view of self. Okay? Any other question before we will close? Ano? Family camp, ang topic is finances. Finances. Ade. Lain naman eh. Pang Sunday school lang eh. Okay, sige. So we will close with a prayer. Pakabenta si Sir John Ray sa pag-pray. Amen.